will be doing to supplement the presentations that you'll be getting during the RBC meetings. So today we are lucky to have Dr. Nathan Smith with us to present on agribusiness. He is an associate professor and extension economist with Clemson University. His major responsibilities include production economics and risk management education for row crops. He also has expertise in commodity marketing and farm bill education. He conducts programs with county extension agents and growers, both locally and nationally. So thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us. We'll pass it off to you. If you have anything else you want to say to introduce yourself, and feel free to share your screen at any time.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Yeah, I think you found my bio. So
You found it.
yeah, no, I appreciate it. No, nothing to add other than I grew up in South Carolina in the upstate, and have kind of circled the South in my career, but came back to South Carolina in 2016, the beginning of 2016 with Clemson. Before that, I was at UGA in Arkansas after grad school. So, as you said, I work mostly in row crops, but I've worked especially in South Carolina with several other commodities. But I appreciate the invitation today, and hope everybody's having a good day or had a good day so far. I guess what I've done and shared with previous councils, River Basin councils, is to try to do an overview of agriculture in South Carolina and particularly in the area for the River Basin. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen and then get started.
And while you're doing that, I'll just note that we'll have Dr. Smith do his presentation and we'll have time for questions and answers after the presentation. But Dr. Smith said that as we are going through, if you have any questions that you want to ask and make this more of a discussion, you're welcome to do that as well. So please just raise your hand using that feature in Teams if you want to pause and ask a question. All right, hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Just as a overview of South Carolina, of course, the USDA Ag Statistics Service, National Ag Statistics Service, does a ag census every 5 years. And so the most recent one was completed in 2022. And we started getting the numbers, summaries, and actual complete report end of 23 actually end of 24. That's when the census took place in 23, and they started getting some of the numbers in the summer of 24 and complete reports towards the end of 24. But it actually showed South Carolina down in terms of number of farms. We were about at 25,000 in 2017, and we have about 4.5 million acres of farmland, down 4% from 2017. And I think that's a reflection of our growth in the state, and with development coming with the growth, both residential and commercial, in terms of acres and number of farms. I think a trend we had been seeing number of farms grow some but that growth was in smaller farms, and we actually saw a decrease in smaller farms as well as other categories. When you look at the value of production in the state, poultry is the top commodity value wise, with broilers, eggs, and turkey, and then beef and dairy, and they still have some swine, horses, and then specialty type animals and aquaculture that are also imported in the state. When you also look at fruits and vegetables, we're like number 5 in the country in leafy greens. Still has tomato and watermelon production. Peaches were number 2, the largest east of the Mississippi. Obviously, California is the number 1 peach producer, but they are largely processed peaches more so than fresh. And South Carolina's just is largely fresh peach production. But we are really the peach state when it comes to peaches. And in this part of the country, we got about anywhere between, depending on which year you look at, but up to about 13,000 to 15,000 acres of orchard acres of orchards that are bearing fruit. Um, our major field crops are corn, cotton, soybeans, peanuts, tobacco, and wheat. That's over about 1.3 million acres. And then the green industry, ornamental horticulture, floriculture, and nursery. If you add all those together, that ends up being the second largest industry cluster as far as cash value. Breaking down the major crops in South Carolina, these are value of production from 2024. Corn and usually is the top, uh, followed by soybeans and cotton, um, then hay and peanuts. Peaches, it just depends on the year. Sometimes peaches will be up to around $100 million in value of production. But we had some freeze issues in the previous year, and so averages probably are in the mid 70s to low 80s, $80 million if you try to look at 5 years or so. Wheat is also that varies kind of like peaches, but it's more about what how many acres are planted as well as price. And then tobacco still is a significant portion, but we are only growing about 6,000 acres of tobacco, and then watermelon at about 17 million following that. So those are our top crops by value. I guess based on the last census, about 200 acres is the average farm size. And again, a little over 22,600 farm operations. Um, when you break it down by size of farm and production, um, I'm just going to generalize here, but I'd say about 5,000 farms in the state produce about 80% of the production or the output. If you want to kind of break it down into kind of size versus productivity. And then livestock, they've, of course, in the news, we've got a lot in the news with federal government and cutbacks and loss of jobs and all. Well, this has already been going on in our USDA agencies where they've cut back on reports they do. In South Carolina, while agriculture is very important, we're number one or two industry in the state, depending on the year. When you consider all the food and fiber production, um, we're, we're a small state in our region, particularly when it comes to beef cattle. And while we have a lot of beef cattle farms, our numbers are probably the smallest over in West Virginia in the southeast part of the state. So they've stopped reporting some of these numbers. Turkeys, they don't report anymore, mainly because turkey processors are considered actual producers. They own the birds, and we have two main processors in the state, or integrators, and they don't report those numbers anymore because they need to have a certain number of producers uh, before they'll publish numbers. Um, so um, I have what 2025 numbers we have that they published this year in January were for the cattle inventory, about 29,000, 295,000 cattle, including calves in the state, and that's up about 5,000 over the previous year. And we were up in goats to 33,000 and up in milk goats. The other numbers are older numbers, which were kind of the last that was either published. I estimated last year about 9 million head of turkeys, so we're probably at 8 million now because of the bird flu that did impact turkeys pretty significantly. Milk production, we're down in the state in terms of number of farms. We probably, I'm going to say less than 25 dairies in the state, but dairies that are left are pretty significant size, or we've got small dairies and then some real large dairies in the state. So when you look at the breakdown, this is 23 numbers because they didn't publish 24 numbers. Broilers, obviously the largest in terms of value, followed by turkeys, cattle, eggs, milk, and hogs. Here's a map of where our row crop production is and pasture. If you kind of the lighter, it's probably hard to see, but you see more lighter shading above the fall line in the upstate, and that's more pastures and hay fields. And the green and yellow and red and a little bit of pink, that's row crops. And basically, going from Chesterfield down to Aiken County is where our major crop production, row crop and specialty crop production is grown. And the red is where the cotton is concentrated, and the pink is actually peaches. You see that in Edgefield, Saluda, Aiken counties there, where the majority of our peaches are grown. And peanuts are going to be right around where the red is too, and there's generally rotating with cotton. Forestry, I don't do a lot of forestry, but just some quick numbers that may have changed a little bit recently, but the forested land is nearly 70% of the total land area in South Carolina, and private ownership is the large majority of it. The latest, I think, economic impact that South Carolina Forestry Commission published was 23 billion annually. That's production and uh, induced and indirect and induced impacts beyond the farm gate or before the farm gate. And then we export a lot of forest products each year too, timber. I guess what I've done here in the next few slides is take the Santee. I tried to map it out, come up with kind of what the major crops are and commodities in the river basin there from Richland County down to Charleston County. And I lost my research help in doing this, so he was better at mapping than I was. So this is kind of what I tried to do in terms of on USDA's Cropscape, Mass Cropscape, where they do remote sensing to pick up where the crops are grown and what crops. So that's my effort at it, and but you can see that it does capture some major cropping areas, particularly in Calhoun and parts of Richland and Clarendon and counties. When I look at Cropscape and with that drawing that outline there, trying to hit it as close as I could. I mean, this is obviously a rough estimate, but the number one acreage based on their satellite imagery is grass and pasture at over 100,000, and then corn just under 25,000 acres, and cotton at 20,000, soybeans at 16,740, and then peanuts at just almost 5,400, and then cucumbers actually quite a few acres. That's a pretty good number of cucumbers when you look at compared to the ag census from 2022, and some wheat acres and sod, a little bit of sorghum. It shows peach acreage. But NAS census didn't really show any acres there. So um, actually, that might be FSA numbers, but that might be because they were planted and aren't bearing yet. That's a potential discrepancy there. When I looked at the counties on the NAS figure by county, corn acres in each of the counties, which would include the areas outside of that where I mapped it out of the river basin. You can see kind of what's within the river basin at 5,000 acres of corn and almost 60,000 uh, within all the counties combined. And then cotton, a large percentage is in the river basin compared to all the counties. Uh, that would be Calhoun, Richland, Clarendon, Berkeley, Dorchester, and Charleston. Those were just the counties that I averaged in that middle column or pulled data for that middle column. And then uh, a little about 15% of the peanuts uh, grown there. I'm sorry, about 20%. So that's just kind of gives you an idea of, at least from crops side, what's produced in the river basin area. So I pulled off farm service agency. So growers go in and report their planted acres every year if they participate in any type of program through the farm service agency. And these were what they reported as planted in 2024 for corn. And again, you see what the large, Clarendon County is a large corn county. Calhoun County is actually bigger cotton and peanuts, but definitely has significant corn acres, as well as Richland, then Berkeley and Dorchester. Dorchester is probably more outside of the actual river basin, and then a few acres in Charleston County. Cotton, like I mentioned, Calhoun is the top cotton county. Uh, and then Dorchester has a good bit of cotton, with some cotton in the other, Richland and Clarendon and Berkeley. And as I mentioned, cotton and peanuts are generally rotated together. So a lot of peanut acres in Calhoun County, some in Clarendon and Dorchester, and just a few acres in Berkeley County. Soybeans, uh, soybeans and corn typically rotated together. So Clarendon's opposite big soybean county also, and then you see Calhoun and Dorchester with about 5,000 acres each of soybeans. Generally, we don't recommend, from an extension standpoint, for soybeans and peanuts to be in a rotation, but sometimes that happens, particularly with as diversified row crop farmers are. Um, and they sometimes plant according to what the market's offering. Um, that's kind of no, I'm sorry, I didn't do wheat. Wheat acres are generally going to be double cropped with soybeans. So that's why you see the largest acreage in Clarendon County and then Richland County. Wheat fluctuates in terms of acres each year, depending on weather, because you're trying to plant it behind soybeans or cotton or peanuts, which all are being harvested in October, November, and that you've got kind of a tight window to get the wheat planted in the mill as harvest is going on. And then prices also. U.S. is the type of wheat we grow in South Carolina is soft red winter wheat, and it's more for biscuits and not the higher end wheat. And we're the residual supplier of wheat, I guess, in the world trade. And so it depends on what happens in other countries as to how much wheat gets exported from the U.S. But our main two markets would be probably export and feed use just a couple of mills, I guess, in South Carolina and North Carolina that would buy it for food use. Um, that had some requests in previous meetings to do kind of the cost and returns related. So I'll just give you a real quick update on where we are in terms of, I guess, cost and returns outlook for row crops in South Carolina. And we publish enterprise budgets each year and do kind of a crop comparison. Scott, Mickey, and myself put this together, and we use a projected yield for this is non-irrigated corn, cotton, peanuts, soybeans, and grain sorghum. And prices are down this year. And to be honest with you, I think where prices are right now, they're a little bit below this because in February we saw the market start trend down. When the stock market went down, commodities went down too. The tariff situation. Our agriculture is highly dependent on trade. We have a surplus of corn and gosh, 80% or more of our cotton, maybe probably closer to 90% now, is exported and comes back to us in finished goods. Peanuts is largely domestically consumed, but we do export a lot to Mexico and Canada. They're our largest exporter destinations, and so again, the tariffs are playing into that. And then soybeans also, we export a large percentage to China and other countries. So if we looked at, got an expected crop revenue for 25, and then what our direct expenses or what we call variable expenses, these are basically the cost of production. Might call it your checkbook cost or the cash cost that you're going to pay to purchase inputs and plant and grow and harvest the commodity. And so direct expenses here, it might seem like it's green there in terms of return above direct expenses, but that doesn't include land rent, which would be $60 to $75 an acre, insurance, utilities, and interest, and to pay yourself for management. They have labor, operator labor, but not for management labor charge there. So interest costs have gone up. That's certainly impacting growers. Our costs have gone up since COVID, but they really hadn't come down much compared to price. And so when you add the fixed cost or indirect cost, then we're looking at this year, we're projecting peanuts and corn making a little bit above debt service and management, uh, and soybeans and cotton being in the negative. And so there's not any room for any kind of loss this year, and these will be good years. And so not a rosy outlook for row crops. The operating profit margin, which would be what's left over after you pay off those direct expenses, ranges from 23 to 26%. Really, if we're going to make, probably ought to not call that a profit margin at that level. Really, where growers would probably start seeing profit is at the 40% profit margin. And prices were there a couple of years ago, but they're not there now. Irrigated, similar type situation. Obviously, with irrigation, we'll get better yields. 210 bushels versus 125 on non-irrigated for corn, 1250 versus 900 on cotton. 1,000-pound difference on peanuts, 4,800 versus 3,800, and soybeans a 30 bushel difference at 65 versus 35. And so obviously you get a higher net return to direct expenses, but when you add in the irrigation cost and you double land rent, double or triple land rent for what goes, and we're seeing negative returns actually even for irrigated. So now we are including depreciation, so that's not that fixed cost sitting all cash costs like it is at the direct level. Um, but when you look at those numbers, growers are probably going to shift a little more towards corn and peanuts this year in terms of planted acres. Um, and obviously a higher operating profit margin, but we need a higher margin on irrigated to cover the higher fixed costs. I want to thank our agents and specialists on helping put together these budgets. These are our agents and specialists that work in row crops with Clemson Extension. So just to kind of give you an idea of what prices are compared to last year, in February, Risk Management Agency releases the price that farmers are able to insure their crops with. And these are national prices based on futures prices or a formula. And corn is about the same as it was in 2024. And we saw corn acres go down because it was a significant drop from 2023. Cotton's way down from last year. Actually started last year after planting the decline. Grain sorghum similar to to corn, and then peanuts down for runners, and Virginia type and soybeans down compared to last year. So their coverage is lower this year because of these prices. The premiums will be a little cheaper, but the amount of revenue they're able to cover is down because of the lower price. So when you look at acres, we're at last year we were down, as I mentioned, in corn to 330,000 acres. We're up a little bit in cotton, and peanuts is where those acres went. Soybeans about the same. We've pretty much the last 4 years been in that 390 to 405 range. Tobacco at about 6,000 acres, and wheat at 100,000 planted last year. But I wanted to show you the yields because the last 2 to 3 years, what's kind of helped us against the higher cost is we've actually made better yields than we did the previous 3 years from 18 to 20. And the yellows are actually record yields that South Carolina had. So it's not likely, this year, past year, 2024 was a hard year because of the drought for corn and then the storms that impacted cotton and peanuts and soybeans. Hurricane Debbie and Helene impacting those yields last year. The other thing that's impacting the ag sector is during those 19, 20, 21 years, there was a pretty good assistance level from direct payments from the government due to the pandemic assistance and payments that are triggered due to the Farm Bill, and then some, I guess, some market facilitation payments that carried over from the previous administration. But where prices are now, the Farm Bill doesn't really trigger. And the American Relief Act did pass about $10 billion in assistance payments. So sometime by the end of this month, I think some payments will be going out. Actually, farmers are being held up on financing to see if these payments will come. But that would be some estimated payment based on their historical production, not what they actually grew last year. So to wrap it up, talking about major row crop water use, our irrigation in the state is about all on row crops is all center pivot, and it's used to supplement rainfall to try to optimize our yields. And the major irrigated crops are corn, cotton, soybeans, and peanuts. And so how much water do we need? Dr. Michael Plumley, who's our corn soybean specialist now, put together kind of the, some numbers for us, pulled together based on water needs per season. And corn needs the most water, followed by peanuts and soybeans, and then cotton in terms of uh, inches per acre per season as you go through the growing season. And when you look at gallons per acre inch, that's 27,200 gallons per acre inch of either rainfall or irrigation application. And then when you look at how much gallons per season, you see basically corn requires twice the amount of water as cotton, peanuts, and soybeans. So when you see center pivots and you see corn in it, that's generally why we're trying to supplement corn through those dry periods where they may not get the amount of water needed. Um, I pulled down the FSA planted acres I mentioned earlier, and I tried to see what the percentage of irrigation was in Santee just based on that estimate of what the growers reported acres that they planted were irrigated versus non-irrigated. So corn is about 36% non-irrigated and 64% irrigated. Cotton was actually higher than I thought it would be, 70%. Peanuts, I generally would say 50%. And then actually soybeans was more irrigated just because of where the production area was. But then that's actually reversed. That's my apologies. Those titles got reversed somehow. But it's actually 36% corn irrigated, 30% cotton, 44% peanuts, 14% soybeans, and 12% wheat. And really what this is saying is in the Santee River Basin, there's a little higher percentage of irrigation compared to the state. And so I'm sorry I didn't catch that in updating slides that I have switched the labels of it. But in general, cotton, corn is usually the highest percentage of the crop that's irrigated. But last year, peanuts was, and I think peanuts is because they were the higher value crop when you look at returns per acre. And that's really, if growers made money last year, it was on peanuts. So I'm going to stop there, Chris. That's what I had to share as far as an overview on agriculture, and particularly related to the crops in the Santee Basin. Just wanted to always end our presentations with growers talking about South Carolina Agri Wellness. They are going through some tough times. It's a free counseling service with Farm Bureau, South Carolina Farm Bureau, South Carolina Department of Ag, and Clemson Extension, all partnered to pilot this program. And then if you want to follow what's going on in Southern agriculture, there's a Southern Ag Today that my extension colleagues across the South do a daily article that you can find at this link here, southernagtoday.org. All right. I'd be glad to take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. That was the first time I was able to hear your presentation, so glad to be able to listen into this webinar today. Yeah, as Dr. Smith said, we've got time for questions if anyone has any.
I usually try to have more on the livestock, and like I said, we didn't have those numbers, didn't come out this past year. That I will have when we're on spring break this week in campus, and we'll ask a student to try to pull some of those down and see if we can find a way to estimate that and do similar charts for the counties, maybe on the value of production anyway for the livestock side.
Okay, yeah, if you end up doing that and want to share the information, send it along to John. We can share with the RBC at a future meeting too.
Okay. I guess something that I didn't really show in there, but that uh, it is a smaller acreage, but it is higher value. And outside of the major row crop production areas along the Santee, there is more of your specialty crop production. So